Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Forest Swords, Compassion. Forest Swords is the alias for Matthew Barnes, a relatively new UK producer who I'd previously never heard of. In preparation for this review, I checked out two of his earlier releases, basically the two that were marked as albums on Spotify. First I heard his Dagger Paths EP, and that was, interesting. It was kind of supposed to be some kind of, like, weird psychedelic drone thing, I guess? Except often with loud banging percussion and looping guitar lines, and also some really great bass lines as well. These songs had about as much progression as, like, an SFTG song, creating a singular vibe, but with just enough progression to keep things interesting. Maybe not 100% fine-tuned to my personal tastes. Things could definitely get kind of harsh, and I definitely was kind of a little sick of it by the end of it, but the guy definitely had his own unique sound. That was for sure. His first full-length album, Engravings, seemed to be cut from similar cloth, maybe a little less aggressive and with a better sonic variety. There were some kind of, like, burial-esque sections as well. And while I didn't like it all the way through, thought some areas were a bit dull, I did think it was overall pretty cool as well. This guy definitely seemed legit. Not only had he apparently gotten enough buzz to be picked up by the Ninja Tune label, but he apparently was lucky enough to get Lee Scratch Perry, of all people, to remix one of the songs from his first album. So that's certainly something. So, how did his second album, Compassion, turn out? To me, it was basically a darker and more experimental version of the latest Bonobo album. I mean, that's not to say this album wasn't interesting or engaging, but it did sound weirdly similar to Migration. Like, especially whenever he used vocal samples and maybe even kind of in the way he manipulated them too. Like, seriously, if you listen to a track on here like The Highest Flood, and then go back to some of the tracks from Migration like Kerala or Ontario, or especially Grains, and tell me there's not a resemblance, like whether straight sonically or melodically as well. Sure, they don't sound exactly the same, but feels like they were kinda crate digging from the same bins or something like that. Yeah, given the guy's unique sound previously, I can't find this fact anything but disappointing, personally. Granted, I suppose there are a lot worse people you could be ripping off. And it's not like he sounds exactly like Bonobo here. It still obviously sounds like Forest Swords. But it also sounds like Bonobo co-wrote a whole bunch of these songs. I mean, his name doesn't appear in the credits or anything, so this is either a weird coincidence or, like, he was intentionally trying to imitate Bonobo on purpose. Because, like, he's on Ninja Tune now, gotta try and fit better with his crowd, right? You don't need to do that, dude. But I digress. This fact is definitely irritating. I had to dock several points for this, but aside from that, the music is perfectly solid. There's a lot of cool instrumentation flying around this album. I already mentioned the weird, unsettling vocal manipulations, which are put to best use on tracks like Panic and Exalter. I suppose Arms Out does this pretty well too, but there's also usual guitars and bass lines and banging percussion, along with strings like violins. I think there's some Asian instrumentation in there as well. Oh, and pianos! The used to best effect on tracks like Knife Edge. That has some really cool piano sections in it. And there are also almost straight ambient tracks on here, like Border Margin Barrier and Survival. I hate how he puts J's in random words. I mean, these tracks don't do much for me personally, but they also feel really rough-edged and fuzzy, and have a little bit of a beat as well to help it fit within the album. All of it comes together for me on two standout tracks in particular. I really like Vandalism. That's probably the best instrumentally for me. Got a lot of that above-mentioned Asian influence, as well as some cool bell sounds in some areas. And the other standout for me is Raw Language, which uses orchestral samples and vocal manipulations to surprisingly catchy as well as hauntingly beautiful effect. There's even a saxophone in there. Thumbs up there. There actually are, I think, some horns in other parts of the album, but I can't remember where exactly. I've done a lot of listening to this album, but mostly just kind of in the background. Like 1 or 2 listens in depth. I do think this album holds up perfectly well for me. All its dark and abstract atmospherics and super layered and detailed instrumentation make for a highly enjoyable listen. But like I said, the fact that I can throw on a track like Grains by Bonobo and it would fit perfectly within the context of that album wouldn't be that different a vibe. My realization that it might not be quite as original as it sounds definitely made me not enjoy it as much as I wanted to otherwise. But do I recommend it? Absolutely. I'm sure to someone like, say, Fantano, like, this is basically what he thought Migration should have been. A lot more grit and texture. But I personally prefer Migration, got a better atmosphere, got more emotional connection to me personally. And despite my unfortunate inability to separate the two in my mind, I think Compassion holds up perfectly fine on its own. I think he was more unique on his other releases, but slightly easier to listen to here. I heard it like 6-7 times. Never really got any better or worse. Where with Dagger Paths in particular, I did not compel to listen to it again after I was done, despite my being quite impressed by it. So I guess it's your call if you want to check it out, but for me, it's not the best. I think Four Swords has the potential to go even further, but this is definitely a solid project, and I'd say it's worth checking out. I'm overall feeling a 7.5 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.